Okay, American federal government moving along. We're on chapter 9, the judiciary, the third branch of government. As laid out in the Constitution, Article 1 is the legislative branch. They have the power of the purse. They control the money. They have they write the laws. They make the laws. Article 2, the executive branch. They have the power of the sword. They enforce the laws. Then Article 3 is the judicial branch, and their superpower is to interpret the law. They have the power of the pen. So you may be thinking, well, what's that big deal? I mean, one has the money, the other has the sword, the military, commander-in-chief, and they have the power of the pen? That's not a superpower. That doesn't matter much. And in fact, your book even had said that Alexander Hamilton had said that it was the least dangerous branch of government. And I still think that probably holds true, and that they're most unlikely to consolidate power, especially more than like the presidency could do. But they have a much bigger role than probably the founders had ever envisioned that they would have. Their ultimate responsibility is to decide what is constitutional and what is not constitutional. And they are not elected. Which of course really bothers a lot of people. Students often be like, well, they need to be elected and things like that so that they're accountable. But you have to know the way that it was envisioned, and the Supreme Court and judges were envisioned to not be political. And they were supposed to be above the fray, and that their job is just to interpret what this document means. And that way, as Alexander Hamilton said, they're supposed to protect individual liberties and individual rights. And sometimes doing that is not very popular. So for example, if Supreme Court justices were elected, they never would have decided to integrate the schools in Brown versus Board of Education, because that was a hugely unpopular decision. But the idea behind it was that it was supposed to protect individual liberties and especially minority rights. And the legislative branch would never do that. And the idea behind it is the Constitution was supposed to protect that. The 14th Amendment, they interpreted that separate but equal was inherently unequal. But that same example is an example how the court often can be political, because they had previously decided that separate but equal was okay under the 14th Amendment. And so they had interpreted that way. So this idea that the court isn't political, especially more recently, is probably more true now than ever, in that they are impacted greatly by politics. So some things that you're going to learn about. First of all, that power to interpret the Constitution was first established by Justice John Marshall. Justice John Marshall is to the judicial branch what George Washington is to the executive branch. Now, Washington was the first president. Marshall's not the first Chief Justice, but he is the most influential and the most important, because he established so many rulings that established the power of the court, chief among those, the power of judicial review. Now, our federal court system, this is not state and local. It's not your county courthouse, it's not your town court, it's not even the state Supreme Court. This is your federal court system, and it starts at district court. So we have actually a federal district court in Muskogee. That's where federal cases are heard. You may have heard the expression, don't make a federal case out of it. A federal case would be a much larger case. So it's not like a speeding ticket that you go to the town hall. It's not even like if you were charged with a serious crime, usually with like, something like a theft, robbing a bank, or even murder, usually gonna be tried by the state. It'd be the state of Oklahoma versus this person, because they violated state law. A federal case would violate federal laws. That same murder, actually, if there's a hate crime, a federal hate crime, then that could be tried also in a federal court. This is illustrated with the indictments against Trump. Trump has been indicted 4 times. Now, 2 of those have been by one by New York State for embezzling campaign funds, or it's related to the campaign funds when he had paid off the porn star Stormy Daniels, so it's related to that. The other one was related to Georgia and the election in Georgia, that he had tried to coerce or intimidate election officials in Georgia into overturning the election in Georgia. So those are state cases. But he has also been tried now in federal court with 2 counts. One trial is related to the documents case, where he is alleged to have kept top secret documents and not turned those over, and then lied to the FBI and not cooperated with them on that. That's one of the federal cases. The other federal case has to do with January 6th in an attempt to stop a proceeding of Congress, and that is the certification of the election results. So that's a good example of how there's state cases and then there's federal cases. So we have a district court here in Muskogee. That's the Eastern District. There's one in Tulsa. There's one in Oklahoma City. So there's 3 district courts. There's a map on page 222 that shows you this. And that is part of the larger 10th Circuit. So there's 11 circuits plus the DC Circuit that hear those cases. So if a court were to start out, say someone is accused of violating someone's civil liberties, local police, it might start out at the county courthouse, be appealed to the state Supreme Court, then it's appealed to the district court, then it goes to the 10th Circuit, and then it goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and thousands of cases are appealed to the Supreme Court, and they hear very, very few of them. They're only going to hear cases that might break new law. That is, they might affect, they might not have been decisions that are clear, and they're uncertain as to what the law is. Big stuff now on Supreme Court nominations, but also district courts. Congress has to confirm those. That's part of the checks and balances. And more recently, we've had a lot of Supreme Court nominations and confirmations that have been extremely controversial, and that is the subject of your discussion post this week. I'm going to have you watch another video. When you watch this video, this is the problem I'm getting with a lot of submissions if you're not getting an A on it. I don't want you to recite. Now, I take notes, and when you take notes, you can take those by hand and submit them as a picture with your assignment. That's fine. If you choose to type them, that's fine. The notes just show me. I just scan those. I'm like, okay, they watched it. I look to make sure they didn't take a note at the beginning, at the end, and there's nothing in the middle. I'm on to that, okay? So if they've got, most of you have really, really good notes. It's awesome, wonderful. But that's just very informal, not worried. But then the reflection is actually a formal essay. And in your reflection, don't just tell me what happened in the video. I've watched the video usually 5 times. I don't need to know what happens. I want to know what you think about what you watch. How does this impact American politics? How is what happens with the judicial confirmation process undermine maybe confidence in the court? How has this become so ugly with confirmation process? And just things like that, to bring in things you learn from your book as well, or things that you know. If you choose other sources, they better be reliable sources, because I'm really big on that. But I encourage it, though. I do encourage it. But I need more reflection on your thoughts and on American federal government, and less just recitation of facts from the video. They hear cases, there's oral arguments, and how they issue cases. It's supposed to be on the Constitution. They're supposed to interpret the Constitution. Their personal opinion is not supposed to weigh into this, but inevitably it does. And then the idea between judicial restraint and judicial activism. So restraint means that the court is supposed to kind of stay back and give more deference to lawmakers. But more and more, and usually that was the conservative viewpoint, but when you see the court, for example, with the Dobbs decision, and say that that abortion can be outlawed, you could view that as judicial restraint, but it also could be viewed as judicial activism. So just something to think about. A lot to this chapter, as there are all chapters. My 10 minutes is up. Good luck, and email me as always if you have any questions.